David Primosch here. I'm here to talk about the economic impact of events like the World Cup and the Olympic Games, mostly the Olympic Games in particular. There's a lot more information and research about them and their impact on the areas that they go to and the host cities and the countries they're in. To start, I think that this is very relevant to sports managers because they have to assess the money situation a lot of the times in certain situations, particularly the Olympics. It's a very global and important event for the world that everyone tunes into, everyone watches. A lot of people go to. A lot of the times, it's about 100,000 people will travel to a city to attend the games. And outside of that, another problem that the games and FIFA also has is what to do with the facilities and the management of those after the games and after the World Cup. There's a lot of stadiums and facilities that go unused. I think that's a very serious problem because they spend so much money and so much time and things like that on them, and they go wasted or abandoned. For example, in Rio de Janeiro, after their Olympic event, a lot of those buildings and places got abandoned and unused. The swimming facilities turned into green algae ponds, basically. It was basically a rundown city, especially with the Olympic Village as well. And then before that, before the start of all those things, the beginning process is also very expensive. Just a bid on an Olympic Games can cost upwards of $100 million, like in Chicago in 2016. And then a lot of the times the games, for example, can cost a lot more than the original price amount that a city bids for. In 1976 in Montreal, the games were thought to be about $124 million prior to the selection of the city, and then afterwards, after the games were ended, they determined that it cost about $2 billion to put the games on, which in 1976 is an extreme amount of money for an Olympic Games, especially for the time and the era that they were put on in. And then outside of that, on average, an Olympic Games costs 179% more than the predicted cost, which I think is a number they have to realistically gauge, whether it be the IOC or the host city. It's important to know how much something's going to cost before you do it, and the managers and the people involved with that need to be better about that number, I think. It's hard to determine, I understand, but with the amount of games that have been played and inflation and ways to measure it, I think it can definitely be done. For example, another thing that is important to see is that Greece in 2004 paid $100 million annually to have their facilities maintained while there was nobody using them. Nothing was being done other than upkeep and things like that. They were unsure of what to do with their facilities after the games, and places like Greece at the time could have had a better plan from before. When they put the bid in, they could have an idea of what they want to do after them and after the Paralympics leave. And then after the games, I think that the economic impact is definitely over exaggerated. One number that was proved to be wrong in another event like the Olympics is the World Cup in Japan. When they hosted it, they recorded $24.8 billion in growth of their economy after the World Cup, which is obviously very similar to the Olympics. I think it's comparable, so that number would also carry over to an event like the Olympics. But those economic impact numbers have been proved to be exaggerated because the measurements and things like that can be hard to prove for economists and managers as well that are assessing how the games and how the event that they hosted did. But one situation that I think could be a solution and something to learn from is Vancouver in 2010. They used a lot of their lesser known facilities like the skiing and things like that. The IOC and the Vancouver Olympic Committee put in $110 million back into the facility after the games to keep it up, maintain it, things like that, much like Greece did. However, they had a plan for what they wanted to do. They wanted to open it up to obviously recreational users and things like that, but they also use it now for elite training of athletes, and they've really put a good plan together of how to use the old Olympic Village, selling the townhomes, other things like that. I think that a lot of the other Olympic host cities and other World Cup host cities as well, because a lot of those stadiums and areas have the same problems as the Olympics. I think they can really learn from Vancouver in that situation. Obviously, a lot of those places don't have great scenery and things like Vancouver does, but I think that they can definitely learn from that. And then just another thing to discuss about this topic is just the diversity and the economic impact that it can have on poor places. The Olympics and FIFA, obviously, the goal is to bring some economic influence to areas. South Africa had the FIFA World Cup, and they saw some growth, and poorer countries are seeing growth, and obviously that's good for tourism and things like that. But the economic growth isn't always there, but when it is, I think that it really helps some countries that could definitely use it in Africa and South America and even Asia and sometimes even Europe. And I just think that that's a interesting topic and issue for sports managers, because they really have a strong impact on those things and those places, especially when they're working for them. So yeah, I think that's a good way to end. But yeah, the sports management and global awareness part is definitely there for this topic. So